Montana Territory, 1872. The wind howled across the plains like a wounded beast, carrying with it the promise of an early winter. Grace Ellis pulled her threadbare coat tighter around her slender frame as she stared at the smoldering remains of her family's homestead. At 20 years old, she stood alone now, her golden blonde hair whipping wildly around her tear-stained face, her blue calico dress fluttering against her legs. 3 days ago, raiders had come while she was gathering herbs in the hills. 3 days ago, she had lost everything. Trust no one, her father had always warned. Out here, kindness is just bait in a trap. Grace had believed him without question. The Ellis family kept to themselves, worked their land, and survived by their own hands. But now, watching smoke curl from the blackened timbers that had once been her home, Grace wondered if isolation had been their undoing. With no neighbors to help, no friends to send warning, they had been easy prey. Grace had one goal now: reach Helena, find work as a seamstress, and disappear into the anonymity of town life. Survival was all that mattered in this harsh, unforgiving territory. Love, connection, community, these were luxuries she could not afford and did not deserve. After all, she had failed to protect her family. How could she ever trust herself with anything more? With nothing but a small satchel containing her mother's silver hairbrush, a change of clothes, and the few coins she had managed to salvage from their hidden strongbox, Grace began walking toward the road that would take her north. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. The frontier breaks everything it touches, Gracie. Remember that. The morning sun had barely crested the eastern ridge when Grace heard hoofbeats approaching from behind. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she darted off the trail, crouching behind a cluster of sagebrush. A lone rider appeared, moving at an unhurried pace. He sat tall in the saddle, shoulders broad beneath a worn leather vest. His chestnut gelding snorted and shook its head, catching her scent. The rider pulled up short, scanning the terrain with alert eyes. He couldn't have been more than 25, Grace guessed, with a strong jawline softened by youth. His light stubble caught the morning light, and his hat was pushed back on his head, revealing sun-streaked brown hair. "I know you're there," he called out, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I mean no harm. Been tracking raiders these past 2 days. Found what they left of your place back yonder." Grace remained silent, one hand clutching her father's hunting knife. "Name's Noah Ryder," he continued. "I'm heading toward Helena myself. Dangerous country to travel alone. I am perfectly capable of managing on my own," Grace finally replied, stepping cautiously from her hiding place. "And I have nothing worth stealing, if that's your intention." Noah Ryder's eyes widened slightly at the sight of her, not with predatory interest, but with something that looked uncomfortably like compassion. "Never suggested otherwise, ma'am," he said. "But those men who hit your homestead are still in these parts. 2 of them split from the main group. I've been tracking their trail." "Why would you care?" Grace asked, suspicion hardening her voice. "They killed a friend of mine 3 weeks back. Good man with a wife and child." Noah's expression darkened. "I aim to see justice done." Grace hesitated, weighing her options. She needed to reach Helena, and traveling alone made her vulnerable. Yet accepting help from this stranger contradicted everything her father had taught her about frontier survival. "I can escort you to Helena," Noah offered. "After that, we go our separate ways." Before Grace could respond, a distant gunshot cracked through the morning stillness. Noah was off his horse in an instant, moving toward her with surprising speed. "Get down," he ordered, pulling her behind a rocky outcropping as 2 more shots rang out. The bullets splintered bark from a nearby pine, showering them with woody debris. Noah drew his revolver, his body positioned protectively in front of Grace. "2 riders," he whispered, "coming fast from the south ridge." In that moment, Grace's world shifted. The isolation that had defined her existence suddenly felt like a death sentence. Her father's warnings echoed in her mind, but survival instinct spoke louder. "Help me reach Helena," she whispered, "and I'll help you track these men." Noah's eyes locked with hers. "Deal." Thus began a journey that would challenge everything Grace believed about trust, connection, and her place in the wild frontier. The raiders gave up the chase after an hour of cat and mouse through the foothills, but Noah insisted they maintain a punishing pace until nightfall. They made camp in a sheltered hollow, with only a small, carefully banked fire for warmth. Grace sat with her back against a boulder, watching Noah prepare a simple meal of jerky and hardtack. You know how to use that knife you've been clutching all day? Noah asked, nodding toward the blade still gripped in her hand. My father taught me, Grace replied stiffly. He believed a woman should know how to defend herself. Smart man. Noah passed her a tin cup of coffee. Their fingers brushed briefly, and Grace withdrew her hand as if burned. How did you learn to track? She asked, changing the subject. Grew up with the Blackfoot for a spell, Noah replied. My pa was a trapper who married a widow woman with mixed blood. Her cousin took me in after they both died of fever. He spoke matter-of-factly, without self-pity. Learned tracking, hunting, how to read the land. Came in handy when I started working cattle drives. You're a cowboy then? These days, yes. Ranch hand for the Diamondbacks spread near Helena. Was heading back when I came across what happened to your place. He paused, studying her. You didn't mention your name. Grace, she said after a moment. Grace Ellis. How long had your family been on that homestead, Miss Ellis? 5 years. Grace stared into the flames. My mother died the first winter. My father and I managed on our own after that. Noah nodded, respect evident in his expression. Frontier life isn't kind to those who go it alone. We managed, Grace said sharply. I didn't mean, I know what you meant, she interrupted. That we should have joined a settlement, relied on neighbors, trusted others to keep us safe. My father didn't believe in that kind of dependence. Neither do I. Noah studied her for a long moment. There's a difference between dependence and connection, Miss Ellis. One weakens you. The other gives you strength. Grace looked away. Tell that to the families who came west together and died together. And what about those who survived because they had each other? Noah challenged gently. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant howl of wolves. Grace shivered involuntarily. Get some sleep, Noah said, rising to his feet. I'll take first watch. Grace hesitated. Mr. Ryder, Noah, he corrected. Noah, she amended. Thank you for your help today. His mouth curved into a genuine smile that transformed his face, softening the hard edges forged by frontier life. You're welcome, Miss Ellis. Grace, she said quietly. Just Grace. That night, wrapped in the blanket Noah had insisted she take, Grace dreamed of her father's warnings and a pair of kind eyes that seemed to see straight through the walls she had built around her heart. The next 3 days established a tentative rhythm between them. By day, they traveled toward Helena, following a route that allowed Noah to track the raiders without losing too much ground. By night, they made camp in defensible positions, sharing the watch and gradually sharing more of themselves. Grace learned that Noah had been on his own since 16, working his way through cattle ranches across the territories. He spoke of the frontier with a mix of respect and affection that puzzled her. To Grace, the wild country had always been an adversary to be conquered, not a partner to be understood. On the 4th day, they came across a creek swollen with early mountain runoff. The crossing looked treacherous, the water running fast over slick stones. We'll need to find another way, Grace suggested, eyeing the churning water. Noah dismounted to study the creek more closely. This is the only crossing for miles. Going around will cost us 2 days. He led his horse to the edge. I'll go first, test the depth. If it's passable, I'll come back for you. Before Grace could protest, Noah was guiding his horse into the rushing water. The gelding moved cautiously, finding footing on the submerged stones. They were halfway across when the horse suddenly lost its balance, stumbling on an unseen obstacle. Noah pitched forward, disappearing beneath the churning surface. Noah, Grace cried out, running to the creek's edge. The horse regained its footing and continued to the opposite bank, but Noah was nowhere to be seen. Without thinking, Grace plunged into the icy water, fighting against the current as she searched desperately for any sign of him. She spotted him 20 yards downstream, clinging to a fallen tree that jutted into the creek. His head barely above water, he was clearly struggling to maintain his grip. Grace worked her way toward him, using the rocks and roots along the bank for leverage. Hold on, she shouted above the roar of the water. When she reached him, his face was pale from cold and exertion. You shouldn't have, he began. Save your breath, Grace interrupted, extending her arm. Can you reach me? Noah made a desperate lunge and caught her hand. With strength born of necessity, Grace pulled him toward the shallows. They collapsed together on the muddy bank, gasping for breath. That was foolish, Noah panted, still gripping her hand tightly. You could have drowned. Grace became suddenly aware of their proximity, of his fingers intertwined with hers. So could you, she retorted, pulling away and sitting up. And then where would I be? Something shifted in Noah's expression, surprise, followed by understanding. You saved my life, he said quietly. Don't make more of it than it is, Grace insisted, wringing water from her sodden skirts. We made a deal. I need you to reach Helena safely. Noah stood, offering his hand to help her up. After a moment's hesitation, Grace accepted it. All the same, he said, thank you. They made camp early that day, needing to dry their clothes and warm themselves by a proper fire. As dusk fell, Grace found herself watching Noah as he tended to his horse, which had returned when he whistled. His movements were efficient and gentle, his murmured words to the animal full of affection. That night, huddled close to the fire, Grace broke the comfortable silence. My father would have called me a fool today. Noah glanced up from cleaning his revolver. For saving my life? For risking mine, she clarified. He believed survival meant looking out for yourself first. Always. And what do you believe, Grace? The question hung between them, challenging and intimate. I don't know anymore, she admitted. Everything I was taught seems insufficient somehow. The frontier demands self-reliance, Noah acknowledged. But it also teaches us that no one survives alone for long. Not really. He set aside his gun. Your father protected you the best way he knew how. But maybe there's more than one way to survive out here. Grace stared into the flames. Maybe, she conceded. But trust has always seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford. Trust isn't a luxury, Noah said softly. Out here, it might be the only thing keeping us human. The vulnerability in his voice made Grace look up, meeting his gaze across the fire. Something electric passed between them, a recognition, a possibility. For the first time since losing her home, Grace felt something other than fear and determination. Something dangerously like hope. The next morning brought clarity and a startling discovery. While hunting for breakfast, Noah found fresh tracks. The raiders had doubled back and were now heading in the same direction as they were. They're making for Helena too, Noah said grimly. Probably planning to sell whatever they've stolen before heading north to Canada. How many? Grace asked, packing up their meager camp. At least 3, maybe 4. Noah checked his ammunition. We should change course, approach Helena from the east instead. Grace nodded, but a new worry gnawed at her. What happens when we reach Helena? You'll go after them. That's the plan, Noah confirmed. They need to answer for what they've done. Against 4 men? That's suicide. Noah's expression hardened. I made a promise to my friend's widow. I intend to keep it. And what about your promise to me? Grace challenged. To see me safely to Helena? I'll keep that promise too, Noah assured her. Once you're settled, I'll do what needs doing. Grace fell silent, unsettled by her own concern for his safety. When had this man become more than just a convenient escort? When had his welfare started to matter? Their altered route took them through rougher terrain, slowing their progress, but keeping them well away from the raiders' trail. On the 6th day of their journey, they crested a ridge to find a small cabin nestled in a protected valley below. Trapper's cabin, Noah observed. Looks abandoned. The cabin proved to be sturdy if neglected. A thick layer of dust covered the simple furnishings, a table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed. The previous occupant had left a good supply of firewood and some basic provisions. We'll stay the night, Noah decided. Rest the horse and ourselves. Helena's still 2 days' ride from here. As Grace swept the cabin floor and Noah repaired a broken window shutter, a comfortable domesticity settled between them. They worked together naturally, anticipating each other's movements, sharing the small space with an ease that surprised Grace. That evening, after a meal of rabbit stew cooked over the cabin's small hearth, Noah brought out a battered harmonica. The melancholy tune he played filled the cabin with unexpected beauty, stirring emotions Grace had long suppressed. My mother used to sing, she said when he finished. Every evening after supper. My father forbade it after she died. Said it was a waste of breath. Noah set the harmonica aside. What did she sing about? Home, Grace replied. Not the homestead, but somewhere else. Somewhere green and peaceful, with family all around. She smoothed her skirt, embarrassed by the confession. Childish dreams. Not childish, Noah disagreed. That's what most of us are searching for out here. A place to belong. And have you found it? Grace asked. Your place? Noah considered the question, his gaze thoughtful. Not yet, but I've seen enough to know it exists. Thunder rolled in the distance, and rain began to patter against the cabin roof. Noah stoked the fire while Grace made up a pallet on the floor. Take the bed, Noah insisted. I'll sleep here by the fire. Grace hesitated. We could. She began, then stopped, cheeks flushing. Noah's eyebrows rose slightly. Share it, she finished quickly. The bed is wide enough. For sleeping. Only sleeping. For a moment, Noah looked stunned. Then a slow smile spread across his face. Are you sure? Grace nodded, unable to articulate why this suddenly seemed important. This small act of trust, of proximity. I'm sure. That night, lying back to back in the narrow bed, separated by a folded blanket, yet achingly aware of each other's presence, Grace felt something inside her shift. The walls she had built around her heart developed their first real crack. Noah, she whispered into the darkness. His voice was soft, already edged with sleep. I'm glad you found me on the trail. His hand found hers across the blanket barrier, squeezing gently. So am I, Grace. So am I. Morning brought clear skies and an unexpected visitor. Grace was collecting water from the nearby stream when she heard hoofbeats approaching the cabin. She dropped behind a stand of willows, watching as a lone rider dismounted and approached the cabin door. Noah emerged, rifle in hand, but lowered when he recognized the visitor. Jackson, Noah called. What brings you this far from the Diamondback? The older man removed his hat, revealing gray-streaked hair. Been looking for you, Ryder. Foreman sent me when you didn't return on schedule. Grace approached cautiously, and Noah quickly made introductions. Grace Ellis, this is Bart Jackson, works the Diamondback with me. Bart, Miss Ellis lost her homestead to the same raiders I've been tracking. Jackson nodded respectfully to Grace, but his expression remained grave. About those raiders, that's partly why I'm here. They hit the Montgomery place 3 days ago, killed the old man, took his horses. Noah's face darkened. And the rest of the family? Wife and daughter are safe. They were in town when it happened. Jackson shifted uncomfortably. There's more. One of them was recognized. It's Emmett Holt. Noah went very still. You're certain? Montgomery's hand got a good look before they shot him. Said there was no mistaking that scar. Grace looked between the two men. Who is Emmett Holt? Noah's jaw tightened. Used to ride with the Diamondback. Was fired for stealing from the ranch. Swore he'd come back and burn the place to the ground. Foreman thinks the Diamondback might be their next target, Jackson continued. Wants all hands back. We're short-staffed with the cattle drive coming up. Noah's expression grew troubled. I promised to see Miss Ellis safely to Helena. I can manage from here, Grace said quickly, though the thought of continuing alone filled her with dread. Helena can't be more than 2 days' ride now. No, Noah said firmly. I gave my word. He turned to Jackson. Tell Roberts I'll be back at the ranch in 4 days. I'm taking Miss Ellis to Helena first, then I'll return. Jackson looked like he wanted to argue, but merely nodded. Your choice, Ryder. Just don't take too long. Holt knows the ranch, knows where we're vulnerable. After Jackson departed with promises to carry Noah's message, Grace found herself conflicted. You should go with him, she insisted. Your ranch needs you. So do you, Noah replied simply. I've survived on my own before. You shouldn't have to. Noah stepped closer, his expression intent. I made you a promise, Grace. I intend to keep it. Something in his tone made Grace's heart flutter. Why? She asked softly. Why does it matter so much? Noah reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. Because you matter, he said. To me. The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. Grace felt the walls around her heart crumbling further, replaced by something terrifying and exhilarating. Noah, she whispered, his name a question and an answer all at once. He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When their lips met, Grace felt as though she'd been wandering lost in the wilderness and had finally found her way home. His kiss was gentle yet certain, his hands coming to rest lightly at her waist. When they parted, Noah rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since I pulled you from that creek, he admitted. Grace smiled, a genuine expression that felt foreign after so many weeks of grief and fear. I've wanted you to, she confessed. Their newfound closeness created a bubble of contentment as they continued toward Helena, the following day. Noah told stories of his years working cattle, and Grace shared memories of her mother's gentle wisdom. The easy conversation felt like a gift, a counterbalance to the hardships they had both endured. By nightfall, they had reached the outskirts of the settlement that bordered Helena. They made camp by a small pond, and Noah left briefly to hunt for their supper. While he was gone, Grace found herself humming one of her mother's old songs, something she hadn't done in years. The snap of a twig brought her upright, her father's knife instantly in her hand. But it wasn't Noah returning. 3 men emerged from the trees, their expressions predatory. The leader, a tall man with a livid scar running from temple to jaw, grinned at the sight of her. "Well, what do we have here?" he drawled. "Pretty little thing, ain't she, boys?" Grace's blood ran cold. She knew without being told that this was Emmett Holt. "Stay back," she warned, brandishing the knife. Holt laughed. "Feisty too. I like that." His eyes narrowed. "You look familiar, girl. Have we met?" "You murdered my father," Grace said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Burned our homestead to the ground." Recognition dawned on Holt's face. "The Ellis place. That was some fine land you had there." He stepped closer. "No hard feelings, sweetheart. Just business. Get away from her." Noah's voice cut through the clearing like a whip crack. He stood at the edge of the trees, rifle aimed at Holt's chest. "Ryder," Holt spat the name like a curse. "Should have known you'd be sniffing around something pretty." "Let her go, Holt. Your quarrels with me." Holt signaled to his men, who spread out, hands hovering near their weapons. "My quarrels with anyone who crosses me. Like that friend of yours I put in the ground. Or this girl's daddy." Noah's eyes flicked briefly to Grace. "You all right?" She nodded, knife still held ready. Seeing her determination, a flash of approval crossed Noah's face before his attention returned to Holt. "Walk away now," Noah offered, "and I won't put a bullet in you." Holt's laugh was ugly. 3 against 1, Ryder. Bad odds. 3 against 2, Grace corrected, moving to Noah's side. The simple act of aligning herself with him felt like a declaration. What happened next unfolded with terrifying speed. One of Holt's men drew his gun. Noah fired, dropping him with a clean shot to the shoulder. The second raider lunged for Grace, but she slashed with her father's knife, opening a gash across his forearm. He howled in pain, stumbling backward. Holt used the distraction to draw and fire at Noah, the bullet grazing his side. Noah staggered but returned fire. Holt dove for cover behind a fallen log. "Run, Grace," Noah shouted, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. Instead, Grace grabbed Noah's revolver from its holster and took aim at the log where Holt was hiding. She fired 2 shots in quick succession, forcing him to keep his head down while Noah recovered his balance. The wounded raiders, seeing the tide turning, scrambled for their horses. Holt, realizing he was alone, backed away, hatred twisting his features. "This ain't over, Ryder," he snarled. "I'll see you both dead before I'm done." He mounted his horse and galloped away, leaving an uneasy silence in his wake. Grace rushed to Noah's side. "How bad is it?" "Just a graze," Noah assured her, though his face was pale. "We need to move. They'll be back with reinforcements." Despite his protest that he could ride, Noah was swaying on his feet. The wound, while not life-threatening, had bled enough to weaken him. Grace helped him onto his horse, then mounted behind him, one arm wrapped securely around his waist. "Helena's just a few hours' ride," she said, taking the reins. "We'll find a doctor there." Noah leaned back against her, his breathing labored. "You were incredible," he murmured. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" "My father," Grace answered, urging the horse forward. "He taught me everything he knew about survival." She tightened her hold on Noah. "Except the most important part." "What's that?" Noah asked, his voice faint. "That sometimes survival means letting someone else help you carry the load." They reached Helena well after midnight, the town quiet except for the saloons still blazing with light and music. Grace headed straight for the doctor's house, guided by the lamp left burning in the window, a beacon for those in need. The doctor, a gruff man in his 50s, took one look at Noah and ushered them inside. While he cleaned and stitched the wound, Grace paced anxiously, the events of the day replaying in her mind. When had this man become so essential to her? How had her careful isolation been so thoroughly breached? "He'll be fine," the doctor announced, washing blood from his hands. "Needs rest and plenty of fluids." No riding for at least 3 days. Relief flooded through Grace. She paid the doctor with coins from her dwindling supply, then took a seat beside Noah's cot. You should find somewhere to stay, Noah said weakly. And down the street is respectable. I'm not leaving you, Grace replied firmly. Noah's eyes, clouded with pain and exhaustion, searched her face. Why not? The question was gentle but direct, asking for truth. Grace took his hand, lacing their fingers together. Because I can't imagine being anywhere else, she admitted. Because whenever I think about tomorrow, or next week, or next year, you're there. A slow smile spread across Noah's face. Grace Ellis, are you saying you've developed feelings for a lowly cowboy? Despite everything, Grace found herself laughing. I might be, she conceded. God help me. Noah squeezed her hand. I fell for you the moment you pulled that knife on me from behind a sagebrush. Grace leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead. Rest now. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. Promise you'll be here when I wake up? Noah murmured, already drifting toward sleep. I promise, Grace whispered. I'm not going anywhere. For 3 days, Grace rarely left Noah's side. She arranged a room at the boarding house next to the doctor's office, found work mending clothes for the hotel to replenish their funds, and kept watch for any sign of Holt and his men. On the 4th morning, Noah was strong enough to walk to the boarding house, though the effort left him pale and winded. As Grace helped him settle into a chair by the window, a knock came at the door. It was the sheriff. Miss Ellis? Mr. Ryder? Got some news you might want to hear. The sheriff, a weathered man with kind eyes, informed them that Emmett Holt and his remaining man had been captured while attempting to rob the bank in the next town over. Both wounded in the attempt, the sheriff explained. They won't be troubling anyone for a long while. The news brought a sense of closure, but also uncertainty. With the immediate danger past and Noah healing, their journey together had reached its natural conclusion. Yet neither seemed eager to acknowledge it. That evening, as they shared a simple meal in Grace's rented room, Noah broke the contemplative silence. What will you do now, he asked. Stay in Helena? Grace set down her fork. I don't know. I have some skills that could earn a living here. Seamstress work, maybe. She hesitated. What about you? Will you return to the Diamondback? Noah's expression grew serious. I should. They'll need every hand for the cattle drive. He leaned forward. But I've been thinking about something else these past few days. Oh. Grace tried to keep her voice steady, fighting the irrational fear that he was preparing to say goodbye. My wages from the last 2 years, Noah explained. I've saved nearly every penny. Enough for a small stake. Land of my own, maybe. Grace's heart quickened. You want a homestead? Noah nodded. There's good land opening up north of here. Not too far from town, but far enough to have space. His eyes met hers. Good place to build something lasting. A ranch of your own, Grace said softly. A home, Noah corrected. He reached across the table, taking her hand. Grace, these past 2 weeks have shown me what I really want from life. And it isn't just land or cattle or a place to hang my hat. Grace held her breath, afraid to hope. It's a partner, Noah continued. Someone to build with, to face whatever comes with. Someone who sees the frontier not just as a place to survive, but a place to truly live. He squeezed her hand. I know it's fast. I know we've only just begun to know each other. But I also know that what I feel for you is real. Tears welled in Grace's eyes. Noah, I'm not asking for an answer today, he assured her quickly. Just asking you to consider it. Consider me. Consider us. Grace looked at their joined hands, at this man who had upended everything she thought she knew about trust and connection. Her father's warnings still echoed in her mind, but they were fading, replaced by new truths she had discovered for herself. My whole life, she began slowly, I was taught that depending on others was weakness. That love was a liability the frontier couldn't afford. She raised her eyes to his. But these past weeks with you have taught me something different. Noah waited, his expression open and hopeful. That true strength comes from having someone at your side, Grace continued. Someone who sees your weaknesses and stands with you anyway. She took a deep breath. I don't need time to consider, Noah. I already know what I want. And what's that? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. A partner, she echoed his words. A home, a life built together, not in spite of the frontier's hardships, but because of what they've taught us about what really matters. Noah's smile was radiant. He rose from his chair, moving around the table to kneel before her, still holding her hand. Grace Ellis, will you build that life with me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my home? Grace cupped his face with her free hand. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. When he kissed her, Grace felt the last of her walls crumble completely, replaced by something far stronger, the certainty that she had found where she belonged. 3 months later, Grace stood on the porch of their newly constructed cabin, watching as Noah worked with the small herd of cattle they had purchased with their combined savings. The land they had claimed stretched before her, wild and beautiful, full of possibility. Inside, her wedding dress hung ready for the ceremony that would take place the following day. Friends from the Diamondback Ranch and neighbors from nearby homesteads would gather to celebrate their union. No longer isolated, they had become part of a community that shared both burdens and joys. As dusk settled over the land, Noah joined her on the porch, slipping his arm around her waist. Having second thoughts? He teased, seeing her contemplative expression. Grace leaned into his embrace. Not a single one. Good, Noah murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Because I have plans for us, Grace Ryder. The name sent a pleasant shiver through her. Tell me these plans. Children running across this land. Cattle grazing that south pasture. Maybe a proper ranch house someday, with a big kitchen and a room just for your sewing. Ambitious, Grace noted with a smile. The frontier rewards ambition, Noah replied, especially when it's shared. As night fell around them, Grace thought of how far she had come from that desperate young woman standing alone before the ruins of her past. The frontier had taken much from her, it was true, but it had also given her a priceless gift, the knowledge that true survival wasn't about isolation but connection. That love wasn't a liability, but the very foundation that made life on the frontier not just bearable, but beautiful. What are you thinking about? Noah asked, his voice soft in the gathering darkness. Grace turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to trace the strong line of his jaw. About how sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you really need. Noah's eyes, warm and loving, held hers. And have you found what you need, Grace? I have, she whispered. It's you. It's us. It's this life we're building together. As Noah pulled her close, Grace rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The memory of that first night, when he had whispered, "You're safe with me," and she had finally allowed herself to grieve, to feel, to hope, would stay with her always. It was the moment when everything had changed, when she had taken the first step toward healing, toward love, toward home. In Noah's arms, with their future stretching before them like the vast Montana sky, Grace understood at last that the frontier's greatest lesson wasn't about survival at all. It was about having the courage to open your heart, even knowing it could be broken. It was about building something lasting in a land where nothing was guaranteed. It was about finding, against all odds, someone to face the wilderness with, not as a burden shared, but as a joy multiplied.